At the end of April, I put up a new episode, 124, Eyes on Science. As far as I can tell, it stayed up for about 6 minutes. I was told that the episode contained misinformation about medical matters. I was invited to take a course of education. Nothing coming from the establishment sources may be questioned. Some of the things I looked at may not be even mentioned, and in particular they showed a screenshot illustrating my offensive subject matter. A picture of herbs which had been accepted for centuries as having beneficial properties. I concluded it would be impossible to change that episode to satisfy the requirements. A few subscribers started watching before it was deleted. They advised me to put it on Rumble. A few of our contributors suggested that long ago. Scott suggested it several times. Sadly, I lacked the wisdom to take this good advice. But I have now opened a channel and put up content including the banned episode 124. About 3 weeks ago I got ill trying to arrange shelter for a homeless woman in cold, wet weather. So episode 125 has been delayed quite badly. I didn't have a voice. In this episode I want to look at wisdom and the lack of it. We've seen Jordan Peterson in several episodes. He's a very clever and articulate psychologist who can't bring himself to believe the Bible, but he makes a valiant attempt to justify it with philosophy instead. In episode 123, we saw both Peterson and Dinesh D'Souza make themselves look rather foolish trying to defend the Bible while not believing what the Bible says. In episode 105, we saw how Peterson and Elon Musk, unable to free themselves from the stories they learned at university, were left with the logical conclusion that after billions of years, hydrogen atoms must start talking to themselves. Peterson produced a series of 17 two-hour round-table discussions with an interesting group of scholars. It's worth watching. It's on Daily Wire Plus. They examined the book of Exodus, the story of Israel's escape from Egypt and journey to the Promised Land. In the final discussion, Dennis Prager, possibly one of the wisest men on the scene today, gave an insight into the astounding lack of wisdom being proclaimed today in our most prestigious universities.
You know, there are many ways of dividing people, right? There are those who this, there are those who that. So one of my divisions is there are those who want to be stars, and there are those who want to be on an all-star team. And I am in the latter. My joy is to be on an all-star team. That's what I have felt for all these seminars. I just want to say one large thing that I thought of the entire time. I don't think that there's a secular equivalent to what we have done here. I don't think there can be a secular equivalent.
Why not?
Because secularism doesn't produce wisdom. That's why. I'm convinced of that, and I have proof. It's not a theory. The most secular institutions in our society have the least wisdom, the universities. So either what I'm saying is true or not true. But if it's true that the least wise institutions are the most secular, it is causative. It is a factor. And the great line from the Bible, wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. When I was at Columbia, and it's on the internet, I wrote this 25 years ago, How I Found God at Columbia. So I was at the Graduate School of International Relations, or International Affairs. And I was already then learning nonsense. Men and women are basically the same. That was already taught to me in the 1970s. And America and Soviet Union, they're just both superpowers. This was not a battle of good and evil or freedom and tyranny. It was two superpowers. I remember the analogy given by my professor, two scorpions in a bottle. Mm-hmm. So I was learning nonsense, and it was driving me a little crazy. All of a sudden, as I kept asking myself, why is there so much nonsense here from such intelligent people? That phrase, wisdom begins with the fear of God, came to me. I had last said it in second grade. I had not said it since second grade. Mm-hmm. And it just came into my brain. And then I realized, oh, there's no wisdom here because there's no God here. I would now even refine it. There was no wisdom there because there was no Bible there. Because there are people who believe in God who are fools. But the Bible is a repository of wisdom. So when I said, I don't think there's a secular equivalent, and you said, what do you mean? That's what I mean. And I want the viewers and listeners to this to understand that. If you've been uplifted by this, tell me what secular equivalent has uplifted you like this has. That's my challenge to the people watching or listening to this. I have summarized my 40 years of broadcasting, and I've said it all 40 years. I have one overwhelming message: the deleterious consequences of secularism. And this has just reinforced that in me.
I think, you know, I talked to Douglas Murray about this with Jonathan at one point, and one of the things Murray has been brought to, I would say, kicking and screaming in some real sense, and I would put myself in the same category, is that it seems likely that the secular is inevitably grounded in a narrative. There's no way out of that. It's grounded in a narrative. Now, you can debate about what that narrative is and should be, but I don't think you can debate that it has to be grounded in a narrative. And a narrative is a narrative. If it's to be a narrative, it is a narrative of something approximating relationship. And so I think your argument is technically correct, is that the secular is groundless. And if the secularists claim detachment from a narrative, all that means is that either their narrative is fragmented or it's unconscious. So,
well, I'll just end with this. There's no way out. I mean, if you're intellectually honest and secular, life is pointless. End of issue. It is pointless. We don't believe life is pointless at this table. No. That's the point. Jewish, Orthodox, Christian, Catholic, Protestant, doesn't matter. We know there's a point. We don't know exactly what. I don't claim to, but I know that there is.
Do we know, or do we posit that in abiding faith and move forward courageously as a consequence?
Posit that in abiding faith and move forward as a consequence.
Even atheists can see this rapidly growing lack of wisdom. In episode 117, we saw famous new atheist Ayaan Hirsi Ali express concern about the astounding rise of utter foolishness, which has followed abandoning the Christian worldview.
I look at these universities, the most illustrious universities of the West, and you've all shared with me images of young women draped in kefirs, the symbol of Hamas, performing the Muslim prayer. And tell me if those kids are not morally and utterly lost. And Queers for Palestine. So while you and I and Steven Pinker and all of those wonderful people were locked up in our ivory towers, let's ask ourselves what was happening on the ground, because in the last 6 decades, we pretty much demonized Christianity and the teachings of Christianity out of the public space, out of school, out of universities. And a vacuum occurred, and that vacuum is now being filled, as G.K. Chesterton said, not because people have come to reason, but because now they'll believe in anything. And I really mean this in a serious way. I look at those young people in their 20s, in their teens, in their 30s, and right now they're being offered these messages of moral frameworks that they're embracing that are cultish, that are based on fear, that are nihilistic, and that are dead end. The way I would like to put it is, you have this amazing civilization, you have these amazing societies, and it is pretty frightening to see that the best and the brightest are converting to the mind virus of wokeism and the mind virus of Islamism. And we have failed the next generation by taking away from them that moral framework and telling them it's nonsense and false, but also not protecting them then from the external forces that come in for their hearts, their minds, and their souls. Again, the assumption was reason and enlightenment and humanism is simply going to emerge from education. The higher your level of education, the more reasonable you are. Now, what we see on display in our universities is the very opposite.
And I think we can see that Dennis Prager was right on the mark. If we look at the foundation statements and the mottos of the prestigious universities, Columbia, where Prager did his postgraduate studies in international affairs, was founded under the motto, "In thy light shall we see light." But Columbia long ago turned from the light of God to Enlightenment postmodernism, from wisdom to wokeism, as Prager pointed out. Harvard was founded under the motto, Truth, Christ and Church. Now it's been stripped down to truth. Christ and Church have been abandoned, and the consequence is just as Prager predicted. The Free University of Amsterdam motto was, "Our help is in the name of the Lord." Oxford's, "The Lord is my light." Cambridge's, "From here we receive light and sacred draughts." So our bastions of wisdom started on the right track. But as the proud assertions of the Enlightenment washed over academia, all our famous institutions of learning have descended to the level of the post-modern mind virus. In episode 117, we looked at what Sabina Hossenfelder called the thesis that killed academia. A nonsense woke thesis from Cambridge University, which shows no evidence of having received light or sacred sips, never mind sacred draughts. And it certainly shows no evidence of wisdom. Well, actually, there's nothing unusual about that. Standard stuff these days. But the young lady who wrote the thesis didn't just leave it on the shelf of her university library to gather dust, like all the other doctorates. She published it on X, so thousands could see what rubbish today's PhDs are. That thesis provoked a great deal of comment on the pathetic state of our prestigious universities and the drivel they are publishing as worthless doctorates. And scholar Paul Graham told us there's an ocean of this utterly valueless drivel, read by nobody and published only to get jobs at universities. Wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. Thank you for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe and press the bell so that you'll be notified as I release new movies. If you'd like to support this project, you're welcome to do so through Patreon. Find a link on my channel banner and in the description below.